Hey, fellow traveler. Welcome to the Third Eye Awakening podcast, a show where we talk all about spiritual and psychic awakening, magic, the shift from 3D to 5D, starseeds, ascension, multiple timelines, multiple dimensions, the universe, the multiverse, the Akashic records, all the good things. I am your host, Amy Belair, and I'm so glad to have you here with me today. Okay, let's do this. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Third Eye Awakening. I am very excited today to be talking to Elizabeth April. I'm sure a lot of you know who she is. She's a really amazing, powerful spiritual teacher and gifted psychic. So Elizabeth is a 29-year-old who was born with extrasensory abilities. At a young age, she was able to see ghosts and spirits and read energies from other people. Since childhood, she has developed these abilities into a wide array of skills from clairvoyance, remote viewing, past life regression, to precognition. Based on a wide variety of experiences, Elizabeth is most excited about exploring the topics of spiritual awakening, cosmic disclosure, and quantum physics. Whether you are sitting in her audience, watching her YouTube channel, or reading her new book, the insights channeled through her will leave you feeling in tune with limitless possibilities. And I agree with that 100%. So we just talked about how we're going to just let the conversation flow in whatever direction it wants to go. And I think it's going to be a good one. Thank you so much for joining me today, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. I'm super pumped to be here with you.
So maybe to start out with, you could just share with us your sort of spiritual awakening origin experience. You kind of, it was included in your bio that you basically had these abilities since childhood. So do you feel like you were born awakened per se and that you maintained it all the way through? Or do you feel like you also went through your own version of an awakening experience?
Oh, totally. It's been ups and downs pretty much my whole life. And I still feel like I go through those ups and downs today. I think I had a lot of, I was very tuned in as a kid. I definitely wouldn't consider myself being born awakened because I consider awakened or even just the process of awakening, being consciously aware of what's happening, being consciously aware of this world and another world that's simultaneously existing. And as a kid, I had no idea, what I was tapping into. As a matter of fact, I thought that I was talking to God for most of my childhood or just some crazy imaginary friends. So I never really had a conscious context for what I was able to tap into. What's really beautiful about, and because you're like a super mom, what's really beautiful about these mothers and these young kids these days is when the kid is tapping into these energies or having these wild dreams, that especially the awakened parents can at least guide them into, oh, well, what is that being telling you? And what is the energy that you get off of them? And they're really given a context at a young age. So, yeah. And I also feel like many kids are born with these kind of abilities as well, especially these days. At the age of 10, I shut down all of my abilities because I just wanted to be normal and fit in. And then through a lot of anxiety and depression after shutting down my abilities, I really just felt separated from source or separated from my mission, separated from the connections that I had. And it just made me feel so freaking depressed, thinking is this it? Is this all that there is? You just go to school, you go to more school, you get into debt, you lock down a 9 to 5 and you're in. That's it. You're in for life and you're good to go. And it was really scary for me to think that most people had that life and they were so happy and so satisfied with that life that we're taught is going to be leading us to happiness. So at 16, I'm like, hell no. That is my worst nightmare, actually, that life. And so through that series of breaking down and freaking out and heavy depression, it was my dad actually who offered a past life regression at 16. And he's like, maybe this will help. But I'm like, I'm down to try anything at this point. And so it was through that past life regression where we went into 5 different lifetimes. I realized that, oh my goodness, I'm not just 16. oh my goodness, we are all reincarnated. And oh my goodness, time is actually an illusion because how is it possible at 16 years old to explore 5 entire lifetimes in the matter of an hour and a half? Like, what? So that opened up the can of worms for me. That was kind of my first real big awakening at 16 of this realization that there is so much more out there. And it was something that I had to experience for myself and not necessarily read from a book. And then 2 years later at 18, when I moved away to university, a lot of my abilities started coming back to me. I think it was the freedom of getting away from the high school environment and away from the home and making my own schedule with my classes and what have you. And then at that point in time, I ended up getting abducted by interdimensional beings. And I really believe that that was my second huge awakening of not only do they exist, but they're here. So who are they? Why are they here? And why are they so interested in us third dimensional beings? It doesn't make sense to me. And so that really kind of got me going on down this path of extraterrestrials and what that's all about. And I'm 29 now, so that was about 10, 11 years ago of those, really grand awakenings for me. And I've been just trying to unpack it and catch up with all the information since then.
Yeah, I really relate to that last thing you said. Like, it's funny because you it's not like we consciously, on a conscious level, have all the answers. It's like you go through these experiences and you get pieces of the information, and you're spending almost all of your time trying to sort through it and, yeah, unpack it and process it and integrate it. So when in your journey did you get that spark that told you, like, I am here to communicate this with a larger audience, like, I'm supposed to share this?
That spark in general has been with me since like the day I was born on this planet. Like my parents told me that I would be 5, 6 years old. I'd be pacing the backyard with a notepad and a pen and thinking, I have to write. There's something I have to write. They need to know. What do they need to know? I don't know, but I need to give them something. Like I literally having this anxiety attack of like, what do I need to tell people something, but what is it? I mean, like, so I've been struggling with that for such a long time of I'm here to give them something, but what am I here to give them? And of course, through at the age of 16, exploring past lives, understanding that I've been a shaman and way showers and channelers and philosophers before. I'm like, okay, cool. It's information. I give them information. I don't have the information, but eventually I will. And that's what I have to give them. So it's been a series within me of knowing that I'm here to give, not knowing what that is, and then eventually kind of stepping into it all the way through. But at the beginning, like even between the age of like say 18 and 22, it was really difficult. I told a bunch of friends when I got abducted that I got abducted. Like I literally just told them the experience. And this one girl in particular, she went around to all of our friends and said, "Wow, like she's so crazy for thinking that. Like what kind of sane person would ever think that they got abducted by aliens?" Like literally I got so persecuted and so outcasted for having that experience. And I know that I needed to go through that to really identify with everyone else going through that and facing the rest of the world with their own experiences. But it took me a really long time to even feel comfortable putting this information out there, let alone starting to put it out there online and getting all the haters and all the trolls and all the people who are really questioning things. I can't even imagine what, say, Dolores Cannon went through in her time, like that was back in, 2010, 2011. But like, man, what were the other way showers, the real first wave? What did they experience back then? These days, I mean, a 6-year-old could be like, I see your aura. And someone on the street's like, cool, what color is it? Like the amount of acceptance is just so starkly different. And now we're having like the US government actually say that like aliens are out there. The disclosure is happening and the acceptance is growing for sure.
Yeah, and it's true. I think about all the people who weren't even necessarily Dolores Cannons, but like the real the first waivers that didn't even have that strong mission. They were just here to anchor a frequency,
Yeah.
and how lonely they must have felt. for their whole lives and how much they probably felt like out of place and even questioned like if they were even succeeding at their reason for being here. And now we're living in the height of the glory period of like, oh my God, I'm here for a reason and it's totally valid. And yeah. So okay, I'm really curious about what you've uncovered about yourself and what you've learned about yourself and like how you perceive your own identity from a multidimensional perspective.
Ooh, that's a really good question. Okay. So I feel like I laugh at the human experience all the time because it's just, I really kind of look at it as a game that not only are we playing, not only are we the character in the game, but we're also the creator of the game. Like we're making the levels, we're putting the challenges down. So I just really think this whole life is so ironic. And the faster the vibration is going and the quicker manifestation is happening, the more funny and the more ironic this reality becomes because you're just laughing at yourself the whole time. You're like, I created this because of this. It's so funny. So I've really kind of enjoyed the process of being human now, whereas I really resisted it before. I really, really struggled with simple things like making food and eating it, just because I'm like, this is such a redundant practice. It's like everything about this human existence was just so rudimentary, redundant, exhausting, and it just killed me to just exist. Now I really enjoy the process of cooking and eating and walking and talking to plants and flowers and meeting a little insect and whatever. As far as like my multidimensional perspective, I really believe that we're all multidimensional beings. So as we exist here in this moment, we exist in this state where we're kind of a little bit of everywhere. I was just channeling the other day how every single cell in our body has its own consciousness. And so we're not actually just one consciousness operating this system or this biological form where, I mean, we're like a multi consciousness sort of conglomerate in this form. And so, I put out a video recently saying twin flames don't exist. I got a lot of hate from my own community on that one
Imagine.
because, I guess they're just so attached to the label of twin flames. But the real reason behind the video is how does it make sense that we could be twin flames, that a soul splits in half when we're actually multifaceted, multidimensional beings? We're not just one and the other. I mean, we're really looking at the soul as a linear organism or a dualistic being when we're multidimensional, when we have split many different times. Like I currently in this moment am also an insect. I'm also a flower. I'm also a 12th dimensional being. I'm also a fifth dimensional being all at the same time. So my whole point was twin flames don't exist because we're not just one and then the other. We're many things. And I truly believe that. And I think it's really important for us to take some time out of our human existence to step outside of this reality, to step outside of this body and taxes and bills and kids and all of that to really take a look at things objectively and understand just how expansive this entire universe and this whole system is and where else you might be out there in the universe.
I've recently kind of anchored into the same understanding as like, it was always so hard for me to talk about star seeds because first of all, I don't believe in the NASA presentation of space. So I was like, huh. I just call them realms. They're just realms. They're just manifestations at a certain level within a bandwidth of consciousness. That's what I understand. But when I would tap into them, I was like, there's something off about it. It's not necessarily past lives as we understand them. It's like other dimensional aspects of ourselves currently existing currently right now. And I've found that these days at least, I think it's because of the acceleration of our consciousness, but it might have been a lot harder in the past. But to me, it feels like it's not even that hard to connect with those things anyway. It's just a matter of like being able to conceive of them and then creating enough
Yes.
space to access them.
Exactly. And this is kind of where quantum physics steps in as well of I truly believe that, it's very difficult to have an experience if you don't know that it's possible to have that experience. Like, if I were to tell you, like, it's possible for me to stick my hand through this wall, and I truly believe that, then I can have the experience around it? And so there has to be a certain knowledge of you are greater than who you see in the mirror to plant that seed for someone to then have an experience of being greater than what they see. And that's all happening at the conscious level, at the forefront level. And at a subconscious level, we know it's possible to stick our hand through a wall. We know it's possible to levitate. We know it's possible to tap into those other selves, but we block ourselves so much on this very visceral, distracting level of reality that, what we see is what we think we believe, and what we believe is what we think is the only thing that exists. So we really do have to get outside of that framework. But that's what the spiritual awakening is all about, right? Is really pushing our minds and our experiences and expectations outside of the framework of what we've been taught.
Totally, totally. And I actually have come to this point where I believe that a lot of the external things that we see in the narratives, like be they mainstream narratives or even alternative narratives, they are actually assisting us because they're sort of like calling our attention to where we're outsourcing our power, where we are like buying into the illusion of the simulation or the matrix. And if we know how to harness it, if we know how to use it, then we can be like, oh, this is triggering me and causing a reaction, and sort of explore that. And it helps us to titrate our awareness beyond, like you were saying, the information that comes through our physical senses. Like that is just such a tiny, tiny cross section of the information that's available to us, even through our human form. But we've been so conditioned to like believe in it.
Totally. And it's funny that you say this because I just had a very interesting experience yesterday, actually. I got this email, and usually I have, other people doing emails, but recently, like, I've been kind of switching roles and like stepping back in and really wanting to kind of know what the issues are and connect with the community. So I got this email so aggressive. I forget what it said, but it was something like, Elizabeth, it's time to fucking, wake up and connect with your Lord, our Savior, blah, 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 like something like that. But it was like really aggressive. And so I responded back to the email and I said, wow, that was a really angry message. And I'm so sorry that your God makes you feel so aggressive and angry, and just a smiley face, and I sent it off. And then this person responds back and says, oh, LOL. I was totally just kidding. I actually love you, Elizabeth. And I was just seeing, what your response would be to a message like that. They're like, I'm not religious. I don't care about God. And like, I just wanted to kind of test you. And I'm like, this is a prime example, a very obvious example of how those messages are just tests in our life. But this is someone who's actually fully conscious of testing. And I'm like, this is really fascinating. And two things that I noticed within myself is one, I didn't allow it to affect me. And I would know if I allowed it to affect me if I walked away from that message really thinking about it. But I just walked away from it being like, all right, well, it's just another person and their perspective and their opinions, whatever. And then the second thing is I didn't react to it when I responded to the message either. Maybe I would block them. Maybe I would just, close the message and wouldn't bother responding back. Or maybe I would respond back and push a little bit farther. But I was just very neutral about it. And so I said back to this person, I said, well, thank you for testing me and being conscious about the test. Because when people push in that way, they're not aware of them coming into my life for a reason, for a certain particular test, and to help me learn a lesson and to help themselves learn a lesson. So I thought that was a very fascinating experience of someone being very godly and aggressive in their godly stance, and then being like, no, I was just testing you. I'm like, all right, cool. I'm still here and we're all good. And I appreciate that. I appreciate those moments.
Mhm. And it feels like very eclipse energy as you're talking about it too. Just like I feel like that's so much what the eclipse was about. sort of bringing to the forefront energies that previously would have, ensnared us or whatever. And it was just an opportunity to feel like, oh, take inventory, like, oh, how much am I still playing with this? How much am I still dancing with this particular thing? But it sounds like you passed and
Yeah. I passed my own test. There's
yeah.
the human irony again, right? So,
So I would love to hear kind of what you are feeling like when you put your finger on the pulse of the energy of the collective, sort of the direction that things are moving right now this year. To me, 2022 feels like, I don't know, a gigantic mushroom trip or something. Like it's so beautiful. It's so different from 2020 and 2021. But yeah, how's everything feeling to you, and kind of where are you feeling our collective consciousness?
okay. So, like, I see everything as a visual. So, I'll try and explain this visual. If you could imagine like two kind of chaotic balls of energy. One is like dark, dense, low vibrational frequency, and then the other half is like a lighter, higher vibrational frequency. So we've had this battle happening on planet Earth for a very long time. I call it World War III. It's the war that no one actually knows what's going on. And so what's happened in 2020 and 2021 is this like gigantic push from the dark side to really try and dull and lower the vibration of the light side. But 2022, as you mentioned, is a very different year, very different energy. Yeah, there are still some dark agendas and a lot of pushing that's going on from their side of things, but they're not actually getting anywhere. Like they're literally just pushing against a brick wall, and what I see with the light side is like slowly but surely, not only are new people waking up every single day, but the people who are awakened and have been on the path, or the people who just woke up in 2020, which was a lot of people, they're raising their vibration every single day. Like they are exponentially learning. What took me like 3 years, 5 years to figure out is taking them a weekend. I'm like, what? That's crazy, right? But it's the vibration of the planet too that's really assisting this. So it's like the dark agenda, shadow government, whatever you want to call it, they're not getting anywhere and we are just growing. So it's nothing like it's not this explosion. It's like this calm, confident, steady growth. And I want to bring up actually something that I remembered the other day. And I had this question many years ago, which is if we completely, I actually had this question to the Galactic Federation. If we completely eradicate the darkness on planet Earth, then how do we maintain balance? Right? Because we live in a binary, polarizing universe. That's where we live. There's light and dark. So I don't see balance if it's all going to be light. So how does that make sense? Right? Because we're getting rid of these individuals who have dark energy. I mean, how do we maintain that? So the response that came through to me, which I thought was absolutely brilliant, blew my mind. I'm like, that resonates, is that instead of having individuals on the planet who are all dark or all low vibrational frequency, and then having individuals on the planet who are all high vibrational frequencies, we're getting to a place where every single person on the planet has the balance of light and dark within themselves, which means that they are wholly unified. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they are like part Jesus, part devil, or something like that. If that's the perception, it's more so we're at a point where we can observe the challenges and the triumphs objectively. When you have both of those sides, or you have unity and oneness within yourself, then you can kind of go through the ups and the downs in a very 0 point neutral way. And then we can honor and respect the journey in other people as well, and experiencing also the darkness and also the light. So it's not all about one or all about the other. And I think that that's where people get misconstrued with what is this new frequency? What is new earth? What is 5D? 5D is not all light, all love, all butterflies and rainbows. 5D is the ability to objectively observe both ends of this binary experience, of this polarizing world. But it's that objective perspective which allows us to step into that mastery role rather than just, I've only ever dealt with suffering or I've only ever dealt with good vibes. It's understanding and coming from a non-reactionary place when observing both sides.
I love that. And it resonates so much. And it kind of makes me feel too like from that place, we no longer have to resist the darkness from a place of fear that it's going to do anything to it can't possibly diminish us, but it enriches us.
Yep.
It's it's not comfortable. Not
No,
comfortable,
no.
but it is deeply enriching. And the other day I was teaching a module where I was tuning into the experience of merging with the divine mind and exploring the Rishi matrix. And I was like feeling into the highest chakras that I can feel. And then I kind of remembered, like, oh, right. What about the lower ones? And I went down to the Earth Star chakra and I could feel about three chakras below that. And I don't know what they're called. I don't know anything about them, but I could feel the energy of them. And what it felt like is it's a place of no identity mostly, but it feels like it is the counterpart to the higher chakras. It's just the base notes that hold the high notes. And as you were talking, that's what I was feeling like, that we do live in a polarized universe, but it actually ultimately is a really beautiful thing.
Oh my God. So yeah, I love that. And it just reminds me of something that I was teaching the other day of the ultimate state that we can get to as a human being. And I believe that we are a master race. Like this is not your average third dimensional, ant-like species. Like this is like we are at the cream of the crop. We are in our PhD, thesis. We are about to submit the paper, and so I was telling people that the ultimate place, the best place we can be as a human being is freedom, right? This is the ultimate word that always comes to me is freedom. Freedom with everything, freedom in the physical realm, freedom in the non-physical realm, freedom to navigate, skirt between both. I mean, freedom in all the ways. And the only way that we can access freedom as a human is if you are okay with not having, not being, not identifying with anything. The second that you're okay with nothing is the second that you get to access freedom. So, what we're doing right now is we are unraveling, we are breaking down all of the layers, all of the trauma, all of the attachments, all of the identifiers that we have held on to as safety blankets our entire existence and many other past lifetime existences to get to this point where I don't need it. I don't need any of it. I don't need this body. This body isn't mine. So funny because when I was teaching this and I said, you know, this cup of coffee isn't yours. This sweater isn't yours. This mullet isn't yours. This hair isn't yours. This body isn't yours. I had a couple people who really resisted me on this body isn't yours. What do you mean this body isn't mine? But I chose this body. I'm in this body. This is my body. But no, it's not. It's an organic blob of material that you're temporarily inhabiting. It's like, come on. So I love bringing polarity to people. I love bringing resistance to people because it allows them to see what they're still attached to. If you're fighting me on this, it's a pretty good indication that it's a layer that you're not letting go of. And therefore, it's a layer that's preventing you from being free. And that's the ultimate step in graduating.
Totally. And I mean, this is the fun part anyway,
Yeah.
right? This is the fun part about being here as a human. It is like you said, like working through this PhD. It is a level of mastery. And it's one analogy that came through to me a while ago is like when you have a really brilliant rap song that you like and like the lyrics are so awesome and they're so fast and so challenging, but all you want to do is sing along to it. We're like at that beautiful place where it's still a bit challenging, but you're getting it. And there's this point where you master it completely. And then it's not as thrilling to sing this song anymore or to go along with the song because it's like, oh, we figured that out. And I feel like we're at the most delicious part right now.
Absolutely. And it really depends on who you're talking about because so in the past I used to do a lot of like precognition. I try to stay away from that now because as you know, timelines are so rapid.
Yeah.
It's like it's impossible to say, well, this is your future. This is the future of humanity. So recently, like I do yearly predictions. So, 2020 predictions, 2021, 2022. And it's really cool what comes up. But like for 2022, it's like, this is what 3D world is going to experience. This is what 4D world is going to experience. This is what 5D world is going to. It's literally like I now have to predict for 3 different dimensional realms on this planet.
Right.
Right? Like it's just so wild. But to your point, like, something that was so cool that I channeled right when I kind of reawakened at 18, 19 years old. I had all these huge picture questions. And one of the questions that I was asked a lot, and one of the questions that I've had since childhood, because I was raised Catholic. I mean, a lot of us were. And my question is, if God is this all knowing, all loving, all omnipresent, blah, blah, blah force, why the hell did he create so much suffering? Right. And now you kind of, you switch that around to understand, okay, well, there is a source, there is a oneness energy in this, the consciousness or whatever you want to call it in this universe. Why would source itself create so much suffering? So when I was finally able to remote view and travel around and ask these big picture questions, one of the first places I went was to the center of the universe. And I said, all right, source, I got a question for you. Why would you create? I mean, there are people starving, dying, there's homeless, there's all this suffering on planet Earth. I can't even imagine the kind of suffering out there in the rest of the universe. Why would you do this to us? Right. I mean, like, why would you create all this suffering? And Source came back and said to me, all right, Elizabeth, imagine if you had everything that you could ever possibly want as a human. You had all material wealth. You had all the friends, all family members. You had great relations. You had all the money. You had all the philanthropic, whatever it is that you want, all the knowledge. You had everything you could ever want. I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, sounds great, actually. And Source would be like, how long would it take you to get bored? I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah.
not long at all. Like literally, like, and so Source continued to explain that it is at a point of this all-knowing, all sentience, all, it just has everything in that state of being. And so it got to this point where it's like, well, why not incarnate and split myself and experience all of the other aspects of experience without the knowledge, without everything? And how would that feel? And so the whole point of this polarized dualistic universe is that the low vibrations, the dark stuff, the challenges, the entities, even the psychic attacks, they're all here as a divine presence to allow us to grow. Because if we didn't have resistance, if we didn't have duality, we would be at a full standstill. There would actually be no point in existence, period, if there was no dualistic tendency to our existence. So that blew my mind. And ever since then, I can really appreciate the struggles. I can really appreciate putting the fire underneath my ass. I can really appreciate having these moments and experiences of hardship or resistance or overwhelm. Because if I didn't have that, there would be no point to being here. Period.
Totally. Totally. And that also doesn't mean that it's like when you're in the experience of hardship that you're just like, oh, right. Source told me that, right? It's like actually experience
Yeah.
hardship.
Yes.
It's not having this like vantage point that inoculates us against the perception of suffering.
And that's called spiritual bypassing. And I had to learn that the hard way. I'm like 3 years into my awakening. I'm like, am I not actually feeling anything? Am I not actually dealing with any of my human emotions? Nope, I'm not, because everything happens for a reason and it's all beautiful and divine. And now I'm really at a point within the divine feminine experience of fucking surrender. Be in bed all day if you feel like you need to be in bed. Cry it out. Like really be with the experience of the emotion, or you're bypassing it at a subconscious level and you're not even recognizing that you're bypassing it, right? So I had to go through all of that to fully experience what experience truly meant.
Mhm. Yeah, I think a lot of us are kind of coming to that in these years as we're getting continually hammered by triggers.
Um,
Okay, I guess. I'd love to ask you about your experiences with astral travel and remote viewing, and I'd love to hear about like, did you have to consciously cultivate those abilities, or did they come really naturally to you? And also, what when you do that these days, where are you most being drawn? What information is pulling you?
Good question. Okay. Okay. I would say that I had to train myself, or at least remember some of my training from past lives or imprints or whatever, to get myself to a point where I can very easily do it. So when I was 18, that was very consciously one of the things that I wanted to bring back into my awareness. I worked with two different alternate strategies to remote view before I really even thought about remote viewing. And the strategy was lucid dreaming. I thought to myself, if I can consciously wake up in my dream and fly around and go to where I want to go, then that's basically me practicing the conscious awareness of getting out of my body in a present reality state and going where I want to go. So I basically trained myself in dream time to lucid dream, or sorry, to astral travel. And I do believe that dreaming in and of itself is astral traveling because you're traveling around the astral. And then I also used the past life regression techniques, which would really just kind of trance-like and hypnotic states. So essentially deep meditative states to get myself to a place where I'm completely in 0 point neutrality in my physical reality. So therefore I can go wherever I want to go. So I really like battled a lot of like, oh, my body is hungry. So it immediately grounds you. Oh, my back hurts because I'm sitting in this position. It immediately pulls you back into your body. So it took me a while to practice overriding any sort of physical distractions to just be able to get out of my body and go where I want to go. So I utilize those techniques to kind of be able to get out of my body. But I'm at a point now where it's so easy for me to get out and come back in that it's very difficult for me to teach remote viewing or astral traveling because I kind of like, akin it to a kid who's like, well, here's a math problem and here's the answer, but I have no idea how I got to the answer. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's like I have to kind of backtrack and really think back to those days of what was I doing to really get myself to this place now. I do believe everyone is out of their body most of the time and they're just not aware of it. Like it's not a matter of how to astral travel. It's just a matter of being aware of when you are astral traveling. And that awareness is key because in order to have the awareness of when you're out of your body, you got to be unaware or less distracted in this physical reality. And when are we not distracted by the woes and the pulls of life, in this reality? So that's kind of my perception around astral traveling and remote viewing. Now, in the past, my favorite places to go, and I think I was more so in like a fourth dimensional realm, was more so like military bases and more military bases and like government operations. And I was just so curious, what are they doing in these underground bases? And so that's where I went most of the time to just kind of figure out more of the conspiracy stuff. Nowadays, I usually just remote view to the Galactic Federation mothership, and I will also do a lot of remote viewing on the consciousness grid of planet Earth and do a lot of work on like portals, like transmuting low vibrational portals to higher vibration and doing the grid work. And sometimes I'll go into inner Earth and sometimes I'll go to the center or the core of Mother Gaia and do some work on her. But that's where I'm really being drawn to at this time is we need to support Mother Gaia. We need to give back, and I really like relaying my experiences in giving back to let other people know you can do this too. You can do grid work as well. And it's a time that we stop taking and expecting and we start giving back and asking ourselves, how can we?
What was I just gonna say? Oh yeah. I need to ask you about ships. I need to ask you about them because I never understood ships. So as you were just talking about the Galactic Federation mothership, like I remember way back when I don't know, like whenever I heard about time travel, I was like, that's stupid. Why would you need a ship? We don't need like why would you need a machine to time travel? You just titrate your consciousness. And so that was kind of the belief that I carried all along. And then I started seeing ships in occasional Akashic readings that I was doing. And then in some downloads that I started getting this year of just like seeing ships, knowing that we're on ships. I can see the bay, I can see the people that are like titrating the information. And I'm still like, but where are these ships? Why do we need to be on ships? What? I don't understand them. Can you explain them to me?
Yeah, and so it kind of goes back to this source conversation, right? Like I understand where you're coming from because in our astral form, we can time travel. We can go anywhere we want to go. Why would we need a physical object to take us there? But also think about it, in order to learn lessons and grow and move forward, we need to be incarnated, right? So you're coming from this very unincarnated place of like, same thing for me. I'm like, why do we have to eat food only to excrete half of the food that we eat? Like, isn't our bodies like such a freaking waste of energy? And then we have to sleep for 12 hours? Like, none of this made sense to me because it's feels like so redundant and exhausting, to be in this physical form that is so wasteful in so many ways. So I get that your perspective is like coming from this place of being a free, unincarnated, uninhibited body of light, which is great. But once again, if that was the whole point of this reality, then no incarnation would ever exist. Then we wouldn't exist here. There are many other forms being incarnated in much more advanced societies and much higher dimensions. And yeah, their form is way more lucid than ours, but they're still in a physical biological vessel. And that vessel needs a certain amount of freedom, a lot more freedom than us driving in our gas powered vehicles, freedom to move through stargates, freedom to pop in and out of galaxies and travel the universe. And we need physical vessels to transport our physical bodies in these more advanced states and civilizations. So it's just like human beings. It's kind of like you asking, why would we need cars? It's the exact same question. Why would we? I don't know. Do you have to go to work? Do you have to, navigate the universe or navigate this reality or navigate, your town in some sort of way? Yeah, absolutely you do. It's the exact same, but in just higher states of being of that's their version of navigation is these ships, which I'll take a ship that uses, conductor, whatever, infinite time warping, space warping technology than a freaking car that moves 60 miles an hour or whatever.
Yeah, okay, that does help. So it's kind of like what I'm understanding now is like if we're in these like in the higher dimensions, incarnation, like our bodies would maybe be like more plasma and light and less density than what we have here per se. But in order to then like be here or enter this atmosphere, whatever, then like the benefit of a ship would be that it can titrate the frequency on behalf of many incarnated bodies so that am I making sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Once again, it's just a matter of being able to travel and having a container that can take you to where you want to go while you're a physical body. Like there are beings out there that are extremely physical. Like I could hug a Pleiadian if I wanted to. You know what I mean? Like that kind of physical. If you have, higher vibration or more plasma, you don't have to eat as frequently. And when you eat, maybe it's a paste that you put on your skin instead, right? Like they're less dense in that way, but they're still physical and we can still touch and feel them and interact with them. And most of these physical bodies, they can't just travel around in their physical vessel through space and time. And they would need a spacesuit and they would maybe need the luxuries of a ship. And maybe they do need food. Maybe they do need toilets. And maybe that is on a ship. It's a vessel. That's really what it is. It's a vessel to take them from point A to point B, but mostly off planet. I mean, it's kind of once again, it's like these vessels they pop into this planet and this atmosphere and all of that. But most of the ships that I interact with are all off planet and traveling around. And most of the beings that I interact with are not on planets, although there are many civilizations and beings on planets all over the universe. The majority of the beings that I interact with do work for the Galactic Federation, they are born, they are raised, and they spend their entire life on a ship. But these ships are so big that it is like a whole planet. It is like a whole country on just one ship. And they've got many different, atmospheres and even like cool, like plant, like aquarium type things. Like it's a very diverse and vast spaceship. It's not just kind of like a tin can as you may imagine. So it's a vessel for travel and freedom. Instead of being limited to just, this is the planet that I was born and raised on, I am on a ship. And no matter where we need to go or where we're called in the universe, if they need to help a lower life form civilization on a planet in a different galaxy, they can get there. And they've got all of their, beings on the ship that can all help with that issue.
That's super, super interesting. It makes a lot more sense, and even as you're talking about it, I can kinda see, like, the bits of information that have been coming through to me, I can see it more clearly, and so I'm curious, like, in your experience with interdimensional, beings, do you feel like any of them are, currently, like, here as we understand here, like, on Earth among us in this realm, but, like, not incarnated in a human body, but actually incarnated in their own bodies, and we just are generally unable to detect them?
There's like so many different layers to that question. So yeah, I do believe that they're here to at some extent. A couple of things. So one part of this would be yes, it's starseed souls incarnating into human bodies, and they're literally humans walking around, but they're really just aliens. There are a lot of those, like a lot of those, a lot more than we would really expect. And then you've got another layer of it, which is extraterrestrials who come here, maybe for the day, maybe for a lifetime, and they are able to, maybe it's a shape shifting technology or like a biological shape shifting ability, or maybe it is a technology that puts them into it looking like a human form. So that's another kind of thing. And I've interacted with them who like basically, they look human, but they are the most awkward looking humans you will ever see in your life. You're like, that is not a human, which is really fascinating. And then you've got another layer of it, which is the etheric realm. Like I've spoken at alien conferences. Actually, the majority of the alien conferences that I have spoken at, there are a ton of interdimensional beings who are all chilling in the room, but in a different layer. So, like, sometimes they're able to just pop in their astral form, and sometimes they're able to come in like just through the fourth dimension layer. So not everyone can see them, but people
Yeah.
who are tuned in can see them. So that's possible as well. A little bit more rare because it takes them a lot of energy and effort to kind of pop into that realm. Not as much effort and energy to remote view or astral travel in. And then the other one that I wanted to talk about was there are also extraterrestrials that look very human in their natural state of being, and they're also just here and they're hanging around. So they are here. I believe that the next big step of extraterrestrials coming, whenever the vibration is right for humans to accept them, is the half human, half zeta, and the zeta being the gray. So they look very human, but same thing, like they're hybrids. They're half and half. A lot of these gray human hybrids have been born and raised on these ships, born from human female hybrid moms who live on planet Earth, and then they've got the gray male DNA, and they're waiting. They're on these motherships, and they're waiting to come to planet Earth. And unfortunately, they still look a little too alien to be fully accepted here. But I'm putting it out there to the universe that, like, if they want to, like, give me one of these hybrids to birth and bring through, we're homeschooling. So, like, they would be
All good.
nicely removed from society enough that they would be safe. So, yeah, so that's kind of like the next evolution of them coming here is these hybrid generations that are really being trained to come to planet Earth.
And what do you think are the barriers for the collective human consciousness right now that need to be overcome so that we can accept them?
It's ultimately it for sure comes down to self acceptance because, if we don't have acceptance within ourselves, I'm too fat, I'm too hairy, I'm too tall, I'm too short, or whatever it is, right? Within yourself, you project that out to others. You're too fat, you're too hairy, you're too short. And we create this division within society of the us versus them, right? This fight or flight, this survival mechanism of in order to self-preserve, I'm gonna fight you. If we can't even accept other people for their religions, let alone their skin color or their gender or their age or their sexual orientation. I mean, how the hell are we going to accept interdimensional beings from another planet who think differently, who have different intelligences, who definitely have different sexual organs and parts and orientations and all of that, let alone looking quite differently? We have to get to a point on this planet where we start to accept extraterrestrial life, which is starting to finally roll out and happen, but also where we start to accept and love ourselves, which in turn is going to allow us to accept and love our neighbors and our other countrymen and our other people from other places around the world. Like that's where we need to get. It's a vibration of unconditional love and acceptance.
Yeah. That makes total sense. Like even just I was thinking about my reaction to so I live in this farmhouse and when the weather started to warm up, all these insects come out in my house, right? And there's this one beetle that I'm not used to seeing and it's pretty big. I'm pretty sure it's totally harmless, but my initial reaction was like, "Ah, kill it." And then I was like, "No, no, 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 it's fine, it's fine." But even just that reaction, right? That sort of survival programming that's like, if something looks different, it's a threat.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I have a rule of thumb, because there are a lot of insects around where we live in Canada as well. And I told my wife because she's very Californian, very, she's not a camper or anything, right? Like I grew up in that environment, but there's a rule of thumb of like don't kill anything, like not even a mosquito. Like if you have a reaction to swat a mosquito, like my jaw will drop when I see someone killing a mosquito in front of me. I'm like, no, absolutely not. Like even my interpretation of like mosquitoes is they have an aspect almost like a DNA of the land. And if they're biting you, it means that they're trying to acclimate your biological vessel to the land that is theirs. So it's like every aspect of your life is a divine creation of source, and even the insects, even the weird looking bugs. So it's important that, just like you mentioned, we're really aware of our innate and initial reactions, even in the smallest capacities, because then, what are you thinking about that other person who looks really weird? It's like, well, I'm a weird person, and if you're judging others, then if you're bound to be judged, or you're ultimately just judging yourself deep down.
Yeah, totally. So, okay, so like, what do you do then when a mosquito is biting you? Are you just like when you go camping? Are you just like,
Yeah, well, it's really funny. Like, what I find is, my wife and I will be sitting out back having a fire. She will get eaten alive, and I will not get a single bite. And I think that it's because well, I'm not totally sure, but I think maybe I don't have the reaction. Maybe I don't need to learn that lesson. Maybe I spend the time enough in the forest to like acclimate my energy to the land. And I told my wife, I'm like, they're just trying to acclimate you. Like they're giving you this gift of inviting you to be on the property and to really spend time in nature to be there. And I've learned so many lessons around even having a mosquito bite and not reacting to the sensation of an itch. Like, I mean, it's just like there's so much like it's such a full experience to have that with that insect in particular. And so I try and relay those experiences to my wife, but it's not always, we've got like afterbite or whatever for her. But yeah, I
or
try
like,
and
yeah, right.
I try my to she's like, I'm going inside. I'm like, okay, I'll be out here. So, yeah, it's different experiences and it's not always super relatable to everyone, right?
Yeah, totally. Okay, I have one last question for you. When you go to the Galactic Federation mothership, are you are you yourself as Elizabeth April as you are on Earth, or is there another aspect of you that's there that you merge with?
Cool, yeah, I love that. So it was so beautiful actually. So I was introduced to the GFL when I was 19. And for the first probably 3, 4 years of going, so I went up there pretty much a couple times a month to talk to them, get information, whatever, ask my questions. And every time I would remote view and astral travel up there, I would change my astral form from my Elizabeth April astral body to a 7 foot tall gray. Because in my last incarnation, I was a tall gray ambassador for the Galactic Federation. So I noticed that when I went up there and I changed into my ambassador form, everyone recognized me and they would all call me Hira because that was my name on the ship. So I figured that that's where I was, always accepted as that. And so I would always go to the Pleiadian Security Council, and there'd be like a big kind of long table, and they would always leave me a seat, which I always thought was funny because I'm not in a physical form, so I don't technically need a seat. But like, it was nice for them to create space for me anyway. So I'd like, transform into this 6 foot tall gray being, sit down as Hira, and about 4 years into this experience, they told me and they said, "No, we don't want you to show up as Hira anymore." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And I was like worried that they were kind of kicking me out. And they said, "No, we really want to talk to Elizabeth today." And it literally like my human starts crying. I'm popping out of that ship because like my human is having such a reaction that I'm popping in. It's kind of like watching TV and having static or listening to the radio and I'm like popping in, popping out. I'm so emotional. And then I finally pop back and I'm like, oh my God, it's such a beautiful thing. And ever since then, I've always shown up as Elizabeth April, which is funny because like my human is like 5 foot nothing. And so anytime I'm talking to these beings who are so tall, it's perfect because I can travel, like I can float up to their eye level. Whereas when I'm on the ship physically, like the astounding difference in height, it always baffles me. I'm like, I'm way better up here in the astral because it's really hard to talk to you from way down here. So yes, that's now I just go up and I'm totally myself.
That's super, super cool. That must have been like such a trip to just shapeshift into a super tall gray and have a different name and be like, oh yeah, right, this is me.
Yeah, that felt more like my true self than this ever did. And it was at that point where I was really resisting the whole human experience of I don't want to be here. I don't want to be in this body. None of this makes sense to me. And now I'm at a point where I'm like, I really own this human body and I really love all of these experiences that I get to have in this physical vessel. And I love all of my other counterparts as well. But I really have understood and accepted and even surrendered to the experience and the everything that I created for myself here. I can really enjoy it and appreciate it now, whereas I never could before.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. There's so much wisdom in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Actually, right when you said that, people sometimes ask me, they're like, all right, Elizabeth, like you can do all of these things, but like, what is your ultimate superpower? And for the past 5 years, I've been answering with by far the greatest superpower, the greatest ability that I have is the ability to be human. If we can master that, if we can understand that, everything else is a breeze because we are naturally fifth dimension, 12th dimensional, what a non-dimensional beings. Like we are naturally beautiful, expansive, infinite beings of light. All of the spiritual stuff is second nature to us. This is the real shit. This is the hard part. If we can master this, everything else is a breeze. This is my ultimate superpower is being human.
That is so cool. I'm going to meditate on that for the rest of the afternoon. Will you share with all the listeners where they can find you, what you've got going on? Yeah, where you are on the interwebs?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was really called about a year ago to create my own platform. I just felt like I was a little bit of a slave to social media platforms. So I've actually created, with the help of my wife, because she does all the coding, I've created my own censorship-free, totally encrypted membership. So it's called the Cosmic Society membership. You can join for free. There's about 800 videos on there. And then there's brand new videos that are dropped every month. There's meditations, there's how-tos, there's the Q&As, there's coaching calls. I mean, there's so much part of that membership. So I feel so honored to give that space to my community. You can find that on my website, elizabethapril.com. And then, I've got courses and workshops and all of that as well. But the only other thing is, if you're interested in all of this and more, I would highly recommend my book, which is called You're Not Dying, You're Just Waking Up. And it's a really solid overview of every single awakening stage that you're going to go through, or your loved ones are currently going through when ascending to a higher state of being. So you can find that on Amazon by just typing in my name, Elizabeth April. And there's an audio book out there as well with that. So that's what I would recommend to everyone who is really trying to figure out what the hell is going on with them at this time.
That's amazing. And you also have a podcast too, right?
Yep, I do. Yeah, it's called Expand with Elizabeth April.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. I mean, I have a million questions for you, but I'll set you free to carry on with your day. This was truly a beautiful and very consciousness expanding conversation. So thank you for your time and your wisdom.
Thank you so much, Amy. Really appreciate it.
And thank you, beautiful listeners, for being here and giving us a slice of your attention. I hope you have a beautiful day or night wherever you are, and I'll catch you on the next episode.
Thank you so much for being here with me on this episode. I appreciate you more than my words could ever say. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe, and share, and I will catch you on the next episode.